let's go straight to New Hampshire. Look at the result of the latest primary. We saw in Iowa Pete Buttigieg win. Well, Bernie Sanders has won the New Hampshire primary. Buttigieg, another strong performance, and Klobuchar, nearly 20%. So the delegates basically divided among those three Democratic candidates. Crashing out, Joe Biden, not even 10% of the vote in New Hampshire, and Elizabeth Warren as well. Well and truly performing terribly in this primary in New Hampshire. We've seen some reaction. First of all, let's hear from the victor, Bernie Sanders.
Thank you, New Hampshire. Let me take this opportunity to thank the people of New Hampshire for a great victory tonight. With victories behind us, popular vote in Iowa and the victory here tonight, we're going to Nevada, we're going to South Carolina, we're going to win those states as well.
Bernie Sanders delighted, as you could imagine he would be, but Pete Buttigieg as well, he was quite triumphant. He leads in the delegate count, and here was the Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg. We'll also hear from Joe Biden, who's had another terrible result.
In this election season, we have been told by some that you must either be for revolution or you are for the status quo. But where does that leave the rest of us? Most Americans don't see where they fit in that polarized vision. And we can't defeat the most divisive president in modern American history by tearing down anybody who doesn't agree with us 100% of the time.
Let me begin by saying thank you, Valerie. You've been my best buddy my whole life, and thanks being there for Jill and me. Because I do love New Hampshire, and I mean it. And what Jill and I just want to thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you to all our supporters in New Hampshire. We know how hard you work for us.
Joe Biden, former vice president, left straight for the next primary in South Carolina. He needs some good results there where he's hoping he's going to be performing better, and on Super Tuesday, because at the moment he's got no momentum at all, but he says his campaign is far from over.
So when you hear all these pundits and experts, cable TV talkers talked about the race, tell them it ain't over, man. We're just getting started. Our votes count too. We're not going to let anyone take this election away from you. Look, I've said many times, you can't be the Democratic nominee and you can't win a general election as Democrat unless you have overwhelming support from black and brown voters.
So, not over yet, according to Joe Biden, but certainly needs some momentum from somewhere. Someone who's got momentum is Amy Klobuchar. She is doing very well indeed, came in third in New Hampshire, and, well, she introduced herself to the nation.
Hello, America. I'm Amy Klobuchar, and I will beat Donald Trump. My heart is strong tonight. My heart is full tonight. While there are still ballots left to count, we have beaten the odds every step of the way.
Let's look at the delegate count now, and as you can see, Pete Buttigieg still in front, 23 delegates. Bernie Sanders at 21, Elizabeth Warren only with 8, Amy Klobuchar just behind at 7, but she has got momentum with that strong performance in New Hampshire, and someone without any momentum at all is Joe Biden, needing 1,990 delegates to win the nomination. Of course, the big one, Super Tuesday, coming up at the start of next month. 33 delegates were up for grabs in New Hampshire. This was a primary contest, not caucuses like we saw in Iowa, so there wasn't the risk of the debacle that we saw in Iowa in terms of the reporting. And as we said as well, the next contest will be in Nevada on February 22nd. We're going to hope to check in with our reporter over there in New Hampshire in a moment. First, though, let's go to Michael Wesley from Melbourne University, international affairs expert. And Michael, right now, as you can see, Professor Wesley, Pete Buttigieg is still in front in terms of the delegate count, and stranger things have happened. Who knows? He might get the nomination. Biden's certainly performing very, very badly.
Yeah, look, I think a couple of things to observe very early on in the primaries. The first one is I think that Democrats across the United States are still very, very undecided about the sort of candidate that will or that can has the best chance of beating Donald Trump. That is what every Democrat is really thinking hard about, and what they're not quite sure about is whether they need a radical like Bernie Sanders to really fire up the base and really have the same effect on Democratic voters that Trump has on Republican voters and get them all out to vote, or whether it's going to be a moderate candidate like Pete Buttigieg, who can basically promise to bring America back to the decent centre, if you like. And what really has emerged from both Iowa and New Hampshire is that it looks like, with Sanders really commanding lead over Elizabeth Warren, that those Democrats who are favouring a more radical candidate have chosen Bernie Sanders. But still, those Democrats who want a more moderate figure still seem to be divided over whether that figure is going to be Buttigieg or Klobuchar. Looks like they've resoundingly had their say on Biden. Now, whether Biden can start to pick up some of the minority votes in the southern states is another question. So the race is still relatively wide open. It's going to be a fascinating few weeks and months ahead of us.
And just stand there, Professor Wesley, don't go anywhere. I'll be back to you shortly. I want to cross live to New Hampshire now, and CNN reporter Nadia Ramiro joins us. Nadia, as Professor Wesley said there, this is a great night for Bernie Sanders. He's won, but Buttigieg maintains momentum through New Hampshire, doesn't he?
Yeah, Karen, he does. I mean, this was a great night for Bernie Sanders. He's from a neighboring state. He was expected to do well here. The question for Pete Buttigieg was, would he be able to hold on to that momentum that he gained after the Iowa caucuses? And he has. He came in second place here, right after Bernie Sanders. And really, everyone's looking at that number 3 and 4 spot, with Amy Klobuchar coming in third place and Elizabeth Warren in fourth place. Now, she took really a gut punch with being from a neighboring state, being from Massachusetts. At one point back in October, she was the front runner. She was expected to do well here in New Hampshire, but she did not. So now we are seeing a real shakeup in the race, with 2 candidates dropping out. Joe Biden leaving New Hampshire early, already in South Carolina. But Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders are claiming a great victory here in the Granite State.
And as we mentioned, Nadia, not a lot of delegates at stake, 33, but it's important for momentum to do well in these early primaries, isn't it?
Absolutely. And when you look at the numbers in New Hampshire here, there's about 24 delegates at stake here in New Hampshire. Compare that to, let's say, Texas, where there's 155. California, there's more than 400 delegates at stake. So these are tiny states, New Hampshire and Iowa, but it's all about momentum. We saw what it did for Pete Buttigieg leaving Iowa. He got more media attention. He was able to raise a significant amount of money, and that's what it really comes down to. Besides the billionaires in this race, everyone else who's not self-funding their campaign, they need to rally support. They need to galvanize the base. They need people to want to come out of their own pockets and to donate to their campaigns.